Hi guys. I wanted to do a quick video as part of the planning series to help you envision what the home school partnership looks like in the hybrid model. Okay. So first let me say that there are a couple of ways to do it. There's not necessarily one right way, but I wanted to help you think through some of the challenges that can go with some of the ways that you could think of doing this. So first, let me clarify that there are some hybrid schools that are private schools. Now, that means that's like a legal designation. That means that in their state, they are registered through whatever their state law is as a private school. Now, for instance, in Pennsylvania, where I live, if you would like to become a private school, there's like three ways you can do it. You can either become an independent private school that answers directly to the Pennsylvania Department of Education, which means you have to fulfill all of their qualifications and all of that. You can get accredited through one of their, I think there's 4 accreditation agencies they accept. And then if you're accredited by the agency, then you can be a private school. You can be run by a church or a university as a private school, which is actually one of the easiest ways as far as a church or university can run a private school and kind of do it with a lot more leeway than the other types of private schools. So those are legal private schools, which means that the school is responsible for the child attendance, for fulfilling the state requirements for what they actually get taught. Okay. If that's the case and it's a hybrid school, then the school is responsible for what the children do at home. No questions at all. They definitely have to assign the work for home. The parents are not homeschooling, but the parents are making sure that the kids do the work. Is like a satellite campus, but the school is ultimately responsible for saying, yes, the child completed, 180 days in these subjects and did the required amount of work. That's their responsibility. Okay. So I just want to clarify that, because in a model that I am talking about, usually what I'm talking about is one that is serving kids that are legally homeschooling, which means that the parent is the one responsible to the state, depending on the state law, to say my child fulfilled all the requirements for their education this year, gives them whatever proof is necessary for that. And they use the hybrid school as part of how they deliver that to their child. Okay. In that case, when you are the hybrid school, and this is, there have been times when I was like, well, their parents are homeschooling, so we can't really tell them exactly what to do at home. But that's not really true, in the sense that homeschoolers will often sign up for a program, like sign up for an online class, or, like there's outschool classes, there's correspondence online classes. They take a class with somebody, and once they take that class, they have to fulfill the class the way that the class says, or that they don't get the credit for it or whatever. So that's not, if the parent signs up for the hybrid school and says, I want you to, I want you to deliver these classes or this package of education to my child, the school can then say, okay, well, in order for us to do that, you have to do your part. Like, you have to do the homework, you have to show up, whatever. So it's, you want to think about that. Like, the parent is homeschooling and they are responsible ultimately, which means that you don't really have to take like attendance, in the sense that I have to report it to the state that the child, completed their days of education. That's the parent's job. Okay. So those are just some things to think about. Now, on a practical level, in my experience, now our program still is 2 days in a row. And a lot of people think 2 or 3 days like staggered. And you certainly could do that. In my experience, 2 days in a row actually works very well, because we kept, especially the elementary work, pretty self-contained on the school days. Like, the books that they were reading for literature, history, science they were doing, nature study class, artist and composer study, all of that, even math and reading and memory work were pretty self-contained. So they came to school and they worked on it for 2 days. And then at home, our program would recommend like kind of parallel readings. So like, when my kids are home, we read like a science book and a history book that in a biography or whatever on our free days at home that correspond with like the time period or whatever, but it's not assigned work and it doesn't have to be done for them to be able to keep up with what's happening at school. And that has been a pretty successful model because you don't run into the problem of some of the kids did it, some of the kids didn't, and now the teacher has to deal with like kids that aren't on the same pace. And it also helps those people who want to just they like the homeschooling part, which you have to like it to some extent to hybrid school, that you get to choose your books, you get to enjoy that time, work at your own pace, work with your child. Now, where it can get a little stickier, of course, is with the skills. So math and reading instruction specifically, also writing and spelling with writing in the earlier years, especially. That is where you see the most tension in the sense that if you are teaching those things at school and the parents are doing something completely different at home, that's tough for the teacher. So there's a couple ways you can do it where you just say like, well, we're just going to do like review and games and you kind of keep it like not new instruction at school. And then you let the parent be responsible for the new instruction at home. You have to make sure that you communicate that to the parent clearly, that they are responsible. You are not teaching reading. You are not teaching math, but you might have a little time in your day when you just review because, and the reason you might do that, if you have full days, that's another thing is how long your day is and all of that. But if you have a full day of school, it's very hard to like only do math 3 days a week and then just not do it those 2 days. So you want to probably work in something if you're having a full. Another way you can do it is to just not teach the skills and just have a shorter day. So the parents do 5 days a week of those skills at home. And then you are working on the things that aren't as skill-based. But again, you might want to feel this out as you're doing your market research, what people value and what they want. When we started with all of those things. And then a year or two, we surveyed our families and like they actually really valued the math and the reading instruction because a lot of parents they didn't feel super confident being the only one responsible for teaching their child to read or teaching their child math. They really liked having a teacher that they trusted working with their child on those things. So if that's the case and that's your market, then you have to, you want to be able to serve that for people. Okay, so to finish that thought, I am good at interrupting myself if you haven't noticed. You could do review, like I said, and have the parents be the primary instructors, but then they're still getting something at school on those days. You're not like losing those days. The other thing you could do is you require them to do the work from the same curriculum that you're using at school. Okay. And this is probably the most cohesive and like robust way to do it. So you are choosing the math curriculum, you're choosing the reading curriculum, maybe the writing, probably spelling also. So if you choose the curriculum and then you say, this is what we're using, here's the pace that we're planning on working. And this is where you have to like walk that line between being a school and homeschool. Because if you had those kids 5 days a week, you would have to work all of the kids through at about the same pace, right? That's how schools generally work. And you might do small group instruction or have an aide help with things or do centers or whatever, right? But you don't have the kids 5 days a week. So you really have to partner with the parent because the parent doesn't have the kids 5 days a week either. So how are you going to really partner so that the kids get the instruction and they get it delivered well without gaps? And at the same time, you get those advantages of homeschooling in the sense that a child can move at their own pace to some extent. Now, this also speaks a bit into like admissions and all of that. I could talk more about that. But if you are going to teach reading and math and spelling and writing skills at any sort of pace that's progressing at some sort of uniform rate, right? And this doesn't have to be the traditional way. That doesn't mean you have to teach kids 100 billion sight words in kindergarten because that's what public schools do. It doesn't have to be that. It could be that you do want them to like master a certain level of reading and writing by, 3rd grade or maybe 4th grade, right? Whatever it is that fits in with your philosophical model for your school, But at some point, if you are teaching those things, you are going to need the kids to be able to perform at a certain level. Because if they're 9 or 10 or 11 years old and you start doing maybe writing assignments or whatever in the classroom and the child hasn't been able to keep up, either because their parent isn't teaching them at home or they have a learning difficulty or something like that, it starts to become, you start to run into some of the usual problems that a school will run into or a child will run into in a classroom, where the class is moving at one pace and the child is moving at a different pace. And it's difficult for the child or for the teacher. Okay. So as much as possible, you want to avoid having that problem by taking advantage of the homeschooling by letting the parent work with the child at their own pace. However, unless there is a learning difficulty or something like that, in which case, in every case, you want the teacher to be communicating with the parent proactively. And you might want to do 2 or 3 assessments throughout the year, maybe when they first start or when they're admitted and, maybe mid-year and then at the end of the year, just brief assessments, depending on your philosophy. If you do a lot of testing, you're going to see this stuff. If you don't do a lot of testing, it might be hard to have like that objective measure. Like in a Charlotte Mason program, we did exams, but like Charlotte Mason style exams. So you do see some of this, but usually more in the older grades is when you start seeing it, because they're oral or written exams and they're like open-ended. You're not seeing like spelling tests and writing tests and math tests at school. So you have to make sure that the year isn't going by and the student isn't progressing, or you're really worried about them and the parent doesn't know, there isn't communication about it. And then like it gets to be, this is the same with like behavior issues, but just in general, you don't want that to be happening and like piling up and there isn't a lot of communication. And the same with admissions. And that's a whole thing to talk about with admissions. But if you get someone in, when I was working in the admissions, once in a great while, I would get someone who came in and visited and were like, oh, we're unschoolers. Now, this is no judgment on the unschooling word or the unschooling movement, but I would usually talk to them a little bit about what that meant. And, sometimes they would say, well, my child's in 3rd grade, but they don't know how to read yet. Okay, well, that might not be the best fit for our program, because we do have our children read in 3rd grade. And we're expecting that the children can read in 3rd grade. That's just what our program is. Okay. So I had to tell them that and just kind of like feel out that this might not be the best fit for them. So there's a whole thing that goes into admissions and all of that. You need to be able to partner with the parent, and the parent needs to be able to partner with you for what your program is. Okay. And it's okay. Your program is what it is, and that's okay. You don't need to feel bad about that. You can't be all things to all people. So anyway, to review that, there's a couple ways you can do the parent and the homeschool and the school partnership. You can have assigned readings and all of that for things, but it's usually takes away a lot of headaches if you just have, here's the stuff we're doing at school, these are the books we're reading, these projects we're doing, this is what we do at school, and then here's some recommendations for what you can do at home, but they're not heavily dependent on each other, except for in the skills-based things. Then either do like a review and just like games and review of things that aren't new and make sure the parent understands they're teaching the new stuff, or make sure that the parent is following along with the curriculum and you're essentially assigning, the school is assigning, this is the pace we're working through the curriculum, we're doing this at school, you're doing this at home, and we need to be moving through it at this pace. We're going to make sure we keep having check-ins and communication to make sure everybody's, progressing fine. And then, of course, as you're admitting students in, like I said, you want to make sure that they understand the expectations, but also that they're willing to partner with you for the way that your program works. Okay, so I just wanted to include that because sometimes there's some questions on that, and it's definitely can be a difficult line to walk between how you do the home and hybrid partnership. But don't be afraid to create a program that is what it is, and it requires certain things, and that's okay. Okay, you want to be delivering a high quality as much as you can while also respecting the homeschool portion of it. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful.